Hi, this is Bartek Skorupa with another tutorial for AETUTS Plus. This is the second video of the series that I call The Naked Truth About. In the first video of the series I explained how adjustment layers work, and now I would like to focus on this little switch, this little sun that is called for comp layer collapse transformations, for vector layer continuously rasterize. Let's see what it really means. I have the image that comes from Adobe Illustrator, so this is the vector graphics. Let's place it into the composition, and as you can see it's rather small, so let's scale it up. And of course we lost the quality, as you can see here on those edges. But this is the vector graphics, so it shouldn't lose the quality. And in order to get this behavior, we have to turn this switch on and see what happens. The quality is regained no matter how big the image is. Okay, blah 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 blah. Those are just the basics. Give me something that I don't know. Bear with me for a few minutes. I wanted to start with the basics so everybody can follow. But believe it or not, recently I discovered some behavior that may surprise even advanced After Effects users. So let me continue. I will size this layer down to 700% and pre-compose this, moving all of the attributes into the new composition. Nothing changed. Let's increase the scale of this composition, and we are losing the quality again. How come? When we open this composition, we see that the arrow graphics is continuously rasterized, but it's continuously rasterized in this composition. And when this composition comes to this composition, now it's treated as the raster. So here we also have to enable this option. Okay, let's undo a couple of times and pre-compose this layer differently. We will now leave all of the attributes in this composition. Let's hit OK, and we lost the quality immediately, although this switch is turned on here. But when we go into this composition, we see that here it's turned off. So we have to keep that in mind. Let's turn it on and see the main composition, and the quality is regained. So this is continuously rasterized, and let's now talk about collapse transformations. We will play a little bit with the 3D space of After Effects. So I will place this arrow here in this composition, remove this layer, and I'll scale it up, continuously rasterize, and make this layer 3D. Let's change the view to the custom view, and now let's duplicate this layer, move it back a little, duplicate it again, move it back, duplicate again, move it back, and maybe once again. Change the view to the active camera again, and let's add the camera. Let's hit C and orbit some. And position the camera like this. Let's pre-compose all of those layers, call the composition 3D layers, and we get something like that. The pre-composition has this switch turned off, so it treats this as a regular layer, as a regular 2D layer. Let's make it 3D and try to rotate this a little bit and see what happens. You see that it's flat. Let's undo this and turn the collapse transformations on. Okay, there are several things that happened. The first is that the camera that exists in this composition has been completely ignored. So here you don't have any influence of this camera. But we can add the camera here, for example. And when we orbit or move, you see that it behaves as if all of the layers that are here were actually here, even if you turn the 3D switch off. So this is weird. So should I make this layer 3D or not? That depends on what you want to achieve. First, let's make this layer 3D. As you can see, we have the access to all the 3D properties, transform properties. We can move it around in Z space, X space, Y space, whatever. We can also rotate this or like this. So this is 3D. Let's make it 2D and reset transform properties. Maybe orbit the camera some more. And now let's move this layer left and right. Strange, isn't it? Well, it's not. I am moving the layer left and right, and those arrows come like this. But this direction is in fact left and right, because we have the camera. Let's take a look from the top. This is our camera. We are looking at our scene like this. So when this layer moves this direction, we perceive this movement as a movement a little bit towards us and away from us. But when we take the absolute coordinates of the scene, this is exactly what should happen. This is y-axis, and this, something like that, this is the x-axis, not this. And because this layer is now 2D, it ignores the camera. But because this layer has the collapse transformation switch turned on, all of the 3D layers that are inside this composition are influenced by this camera. So it behaves exactly as it should. This is the same situation as if you, for example, take few 3D layers and parent them to some 2D layer. It will behave exactly the same. Let me simulate this, for example, here in this pre-composition. Let's add some null object. And this is 2D null object. Let's parent all of those arrows to this null. And try to move this null object left and right. So you see that it behaves exactly the same. When we turn this null object into 3D space, it behaves differently. Let's reset the transform properties of this null and erase this. Go to the master comp, and now you can decide if you want this layer to be 2D or 3D. Because now it acts as if it was the parent of all of the 3D layers that are inside of this composition. Okay, but these are also the basics. There are two more things that this switch can do. The first one has something to do with the blending modes. As you can see, when the collapse transformations is turned on, the blending modes are disabled. Let's take a closer look at this. Let's forget about the 3D space for a moment. Let's delete this camera, go into this composition, remove all of the layers, leaving only the one, make it 2D again, go to the master comp, turn collapse transformations off, open this comp again, and change the blending mode of this layer to multiply, for example. Let's go to the master comp, reset the transform properties of this layer, and add some solid below. And now let's turn collapse transformations on and off, on and off. What happens? When you turn collapse transformations on, you see that the blending modes here are disabled because it takes into account all of the blending modes of the layers that are here in this pre-composition. Let's take a look at the transparency, and you see that this layer exists here alone. It has the multiply blending mode, but here it blends with nothing. But the blending mode of this layer is taken into account here in the master composition. So when you turn collapse transformations off, this is treated like the regular layer. And you can turn whatever blending mode you like. For example, multiply. Let's change it back to normal. Turn collapse transformations on. And you get the same result because the layer that exists inside this composition has the multiply blending mode. And the last thing that I wanted to tell you about this little powerful switch is something that I discovered like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. Believe it or not, but it was the revelation for me. I felt like an idiot. I felt like somebody who just started his journey with After Effects. How come that I didn't know this earlier? Let me show you what I mean. As you know, there are many effects in After Effects that can be applied to some layer and take the data from some other layer. Like here in the channel category. Set matte. When applied to some layer, it can take the data from another layer and turn it into the alpha channel of the layer it's applied to. Compound arithmetic. Set channels. Or I don't know, trapcodes form, for example. It can take the data from another layer and use it as a map for, I don't know, fractal noise or anything like that. And all those effects have one feature in common that can be very annoying. When you take the data from some other layer, the effect ignores all of the effects that are applied to this layer that the data are taken from. It ignores the masks that are applied to those layers. But you cannot do anything about it. But they also ignore the transform properties of this layer. Let me show it to you. I will use something simple like set matte. Let me add some solid of a different color. Maybe move this layer below everything. And now I will apply the set matte effect to this solid, taking the data from the third layer. So now I turned the alpha channel of this layer into the alpha channel of this layer. The collapse transformation switch of this layer should be turned off. And now let's try to move it around. Change the scale, rotation. So as you can see, I changed the transform properties of this layer and nothing changes here. Let's reset this layer. And let's imagine that we want this layer to be animated. What would you do normally? You would pre-compose this layer, moving all of the attributes into the new composition, and then make the animation here in the pre-composition. So let's, for example, add the keyframe for the position, then move it somewhere here and here. Let's also size it down, add a keyframe, go to the beginning and size it up. So we have this animation, right? And of course, in the master comp, you see that it behaves as it should. But when you want to tweak this animation a little bit, you have to go into this composition, change the keyframes and so on. So this is really painful. So let's remove all of the keyframes and reset the transform properties of this layer. Go to the master comp and collapse transformations of this layer. And now you can animate, you can rotate, you can scale, you can do whatever. And this is reflected here. And I am showing it to you only using the set matte effect. But this applies to all of the effects that use the data from another layer. If the transformations of the layer that the data are taken from are collapsed, they are taken into account here in this effect. And as I told you, I discovered this behavior like 2 or 3 months ago. I don't know how. I must have turned the collapse transformations on by mistake. And then I realized, wow, what happens is amazing. So just a little switch and so many functionalities. It continuously rasterizes the vector graphics. It collapses the transformations of the 3D layers that are pre-composed. When it's turned on, all of the blending modes of all of the layers that are inside the pre-composition are taken into account. And this thing, if you apply some effect that uses the data from this layer, you can animate the transform properties of this layer here in the master composition, and they will be reflected in the behavior of this effect. So this is the naked truth about collapse transformation, continuously rasterize switch. Thank you very much. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye.